Hello, everybody. My name's John Lacey, and this is Coffee and Content, the weekly live stream about video, live streaming, and content creation. Thank you for joining me today. We're going out live to all the various places. So if you are joining me live, I'd love to hear from you in the chat. If you can let me know where you're coming to me from, that would be awesome. Today on the show, we're going to be talking all about creating a live streaming checklist. We're going to think about why you might want to do this, why your live streaming checklist should be unique to you, and cover some of the things that you might like to consider adding to it. So that's all coming up on today's show. My name's John Lacey. Thank you for joining me. Obviously, this is Coffee and Content, so this is a show very much powered by caffeine. So before we get started, I better take a sip of coffee. I love some coffee any day of the week, but it's particularly great on a Sunday morning as it is here in Australia at the moment. Obviously, time zones exist and that's always fun, sort of negotiating that with different people. But anyway, like I said, today we're talking all about live streaming and actually creating a checklist to actually help you live stream. So why might it be useful to have a checklist for live streaming? Well, potentially there's a lot of moving parts when it comes to your live stream. And there's a really good chance that you're wearing a number of different hats. So you could be the on-air talent, you could be the producer, you could be doing literally everything by yourself. And that's literally what I'm doing here today. I do have another show with a co-host and a co-producer, but certainly for this show, I'm doing everything sort of live in real time. So there are a lot of different things to consider. As well, depending on the types of tools and technologies you're using, there'll be different steps on how to work with those as well. So keep that in mind. And really, there's a good chance before your live stream starts, you really want to be thinking about what you're doing and about the topic for the day. And if you have to remember 300 different things, and I say 300 as a bit of an exaggeration, it's probably a lot less than that, but you know, if you have to spend your time worrying about the setup of the live stream, you'll probably be less invested in the content that you should be presenting and also the interaction with the audience. So again, it's sort of an effort to take away that cognitive load of knowing that you've done all the steps. And I guess the other thing too is there are important steps that if you miss them, your whole live stream is just ruined. And we've all been here. I'm not, this is certainly something I've done. You've given the greatest presentation of your life, and then you watch the recording back and realize the audio wasn't working, or you had the wrong microphone selected, or the camera was pointed in a weird place, or the lights weren't doing their thing. So, there's all kinds of potential pitfalls. And I think it's really important to think about, what they might be, plan for them, maybe even have some backup plans as well. So I guess the other thing that I really want to underscore here is that your checklist should be unique to you, and it should be something that's set up in a way that supports you. So it could be just printed out on a piece of paper and you go through the steps and you tick things off as you go. It could be a spreadsheet, it could be a form on your computer, whatever it happens to be, that's fine. But as long as, and I guess it can be as simple or as elaborate as you need it to be as well. So this really is to support you. And for that reason, I'm very reluctant to actually give you sort of a standardized template to work from. I think it is something that you need to spend a little bit of time on creating yourself. And, that's really, really important. But again, think about your technology stack, because everybody's working with different things. Different software will work in different ways. And certainly I have 2 live streaming shows. This one, the Coffee and Content show, and also the video and live streaming show, which I do with my co-host Sam Proof. I use some very different technology on both of those, and there are different steps that I need to do. And we'll talk about those, and I'll give some more examples as we go through today. So, those are the reasons why I think it is worthwhile to have a checklist in the first place. And again, just keep in mind that it does need to be customized towards you. I'm going to take another sip of coffee. This is Coffee and Content, the weekly live stream about video, live streaming, and content creation. My name's John Lacey. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you're out there watching live, I'd love to hear from you in the chat. And I can tell you one person that is definitely watching live is Walter Strong III. Hello, Walter. Thank you so much for joining us. Today, we're talking all about creating a live streaming checklist. And as I said earlier, it's really important because there are a number of moving parts to any given live stream. It will vary a little bit between different platforms and different technology stacks and the cameras and the audio equipment that you're using. But I think the really important thing is that you don't try and actually try to remember all those things ahead of time, because you really want to be focusing on your audience and your content. You don't really want to be too obsessed with some of the technical aspects that are going on. And we really want to take off that cognitive load. So if there's any way you can outsource that to a list, and again, it doesn't need to be too elaborate. It can be as simple or as elaborate as you need it to be. But the idea is that you've got certain things that you need to do to have a successful live stream. And it's really important that you articulate those and you set yourself up for success. So let's actually talk about planning and scheduling to start off with. So you need to know when your live stream is happening. You need to know where it's happening, what destinations it's happening on. You could be using a multi-streaming or multicasting tool, such as Restream, which is something that I'm kind of using today to go out to a number of different destinations. But I think also you need to know about what you're going to be talking about. I think focus is something that is really, really important. And I see a lot of podcasts where it's just a bunch of friends talking about whatever comes into their heads. And that can be entertaining, but especially if you're doing this for a business purpose, you really want to have a focus, and it should sort of meet some sort of business goal as well. But I guess the other thing too is if you're interviewing somebody, if you're having a discussion, having a panel discussion perhaps, you need to think about scheduling these things, especially when they happen over multiple time zones, and especially, with the introduction or the going away of daylight savings. That's another really, really important thing too. And hello to Garen Belaney, the man, the myth, the legend from Micro Studio. When it's time to go, grab your Micro Studio. If you are looking to actually get into live streaming, Garen can really help you with a lot of the equipment and the know-how to get started. So he's coming to us from Canada, which is just such a beautiful part of the world. So again, check out Garen's stuff. And of course, I'm hoping to have a discussion with Garen about some of the things he does moving forward. We've been talking in the DMs. That I can't promise anything just yet, but hopefully that's on the cards. So today we're actually talking about creating a checklist for going live. Walter has got a comment here. Having a live stream checklist is so important to have for a new live streamer. Absolutely, because I think sometimes you can really get blindsided by random things that just crop up, and you don't want to be stressed. That's the really great benefit of having a checklist, is that you know that you're doing these things. So in terms of planning and scheduling, I guess the other benefit too for scheduling is that you give yourself enough of a window to actually let people know that it's happening, and you can promote it. You can maybe tease some of that content ahead of time. And you can think about the tools and technologies that go into that. I mean, regardless of which live stream show I'm doing, I've got to create some artwork for that. I've got to think about the title. I've got to give it a description. I might have to tag different people or use particular hashtags depending on where it's going out. So, those are all really useful things to think about. And I guess the other thing too is when it comes to planning and scheduling, do you have a show run document? So do you have segments on your show? Are there particular topics or points that you really want to hit? And how do you actually articulate that information and share that with the other people that are who you might be working with on a live stream? And again, that doesn't have to be elaborate. I know on the video and live streaming show with Sam Proof and myself, we actually just create a new Google Drive folder, and we've got a Google document in there. We just outline our points and we go from there. So again, we've thought about planning and scheduling our content ahead of time. We've sort of thought a little bit about promoting it ahead of time, which is really useful. Different platforms do give you different capabilities, and it is possible to actually invite people in your network to your LinkedIn Live, for example. That is a bizarrely manual process, and I haven't found great success doing that, but it's interesting to note that it is there. Um, I guess, the next thing we need to talk about a little bit is, actually setting up for the show itself. And again, that will look very, very different depending on the software that you're using, the hardware that you're using. Let's talk about the video and live streaming show. So that is actually a show I do with Sam Proof. We actually use Restream Studio in the browser to do that show. He comes in on his camera and audio. I do the same. I actually import the graphic, the thumbnail, to that piece of software, so I can have that at the beginning and the end of the show. I do actually have some music for that show that's on the Rodecaster Pro. I just hit a button when I'm ready to play that. But I do also have the ability to think about some lower thirds, and I do like to actually think about the topics that we're covering that have been in that show run document and make sure that we articulate those, because they can be really good prompts for me, and they can be something nice and visual to have on the screen as well. The only thing I would say about doing a solo show is that you can talk quite a lot, and I feel like I'm doing that right now. So I'm going to take another sip of coffee, because with coffee, all things are possible. So this is Coffee and Content, the weekly live stream about video, live streaming, and content creation. My name's John Lacey. Thank you so much for joining me today. So I've just described one of my live streaming shows, the video and live streaming show, which we do in Restream Studio in the browser. I do need to make sure that I've got my assets set up in that before we do go live. So it can be a case of actually having screenshots if we're talking about software. It can be a matter of actually incorporating lower thirds, either to introduce people, to introduce different topics. Restream Studio is interesting because it actually has some QR code capability brought into it. So even if you wanted to send somebody off to another website, that is something that you can do in that software really, really easily. So now if we compare this with this show that I'm doing right now, which is something a little bit different. I actually do this completely in OBS Studio, which is a lovely piece of software that I talk about endlessly. And if it's something you're interested in learning more about, you should definitely subscribe, because I love to do that. And we've got another great comment here from Walter. So when I first started live streaming, I was doing interview style live streams. I have since transitioned over to solo live streams. And it's great. And I think it's worthwhile. And again, it may not be the thing to do when you start, but all the different format types, they have different costs and benefits, and the solo episodes are often a good way of positioning yourself as an expert. Whereas the interviews, you're usually showcasing the person you're talking to, but they can be an amazing tool for actually networking and talking to other people, and just sort of sharing audiences between, two or more people. So that can be a great way of doing that as well. But in terms of the way that I run this show in OBS Studio, I've got to make sure I've got the software open, obviously. I've got to make sure that there's actually a different way of handling chat comments. And again, I'm actually going out via Restream, not Restream Studio in the browser, but I'm actually taking the signal from OBS Studio and broadcasting that to my destinations via Restream. The reason we do that, and the reason that is really, really important, is because it is possible to actually go live to a number of different destinations, even via OBS and via plugins with OBS. But the thing you need to keep in mind is that you're sending a lot of data to a lot of services, and you really need to make sure that your internet connection is quite strong and quite reliable and quite speedy. Whereas if I send this out to Restream, it'll actually do a lot of the heavy lifting to make sure that this goes out to YouTube and Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter and even Twitch. And I don't know why I send it out to Twitch, because I don't really use Twitch, but it's an option, and I thought, why not? Let's give it a go. But again, in terms of how I work in terms of OBS and, some of the things that I would include in my own checklist is making sure that I have the Restream chat open. I actually use a Chrome plugin, which is It's the Ninja Chat, which you can find at socialstream.ninja. And that actually allows me to bring in comments onto my screen within OBS, like this one from Walter that you're seeing right now. And I need to make sure that I've got a tab open, that I've got that extension enabled, and that I run a test comment just to make sure that it is working the way I expect it to work. Thank you so much for subscribing on YouTube. I love that. Thank you. And I must admit, I don't actually tell people where my YouTube channel is very often. So if you are, if you do want to follow on YouTube, it's actually at Learn Livestreaming. So you can go and check that out. So there are actually a number of different steps, and again, I've got to make sure that I've got my music ready to go. I actually go into OBS and I switch out a different graphic for my show. I'll show you that really, really briefly in a second. I've also got some music that I've got on the Rodecaster again, and it's different music for this show, but I've got to make sure that I've got all those things ready to go. Got to make sure I hit that start streaming button, and again, I like to do that on the Elgato Stream Deck. And I can also make sure that I've got my scene set up. So today I'm really just talking to you, but in other weeks I would often share my screen, I would go to different views, and I would do different things. So again, it's just really about thinking about what you do on your show and just thinking about what you need to be aware of. Obviously, I need to turn the camera on. I've got a teleprompter unit, so I've got an external monitor that I like to turn on as well. I've got my Elgato key lights. I've got to make sure my audio is working correctly. So it doesn't have to be a big thing, but I think it is really important that you just make a list. Just take it out of your memory and put it somewhere physical or digital that you can refer to. And that way you won't get stressed, or you won't get as stressed, and you can focus on actually delivering your show and working from there. So if you are, and I know we do have a lot of, we do have some streamers out there in the chat and lurking as well. So I'm really curious, do you have a checklist, or have you been doing this for long enough that you kind of know what the major points are that you need to hit to make sure that everything goes really well? Because I think, and I'm not going to name names, but there was a fairly popular live streamer who just bought a new computer and was trying to do their live stream, and there was a problem. They couldn't share their screen. And they were quite clearly overwhelmed by the chat because they had literally gone live and realized this in real time. There's all this stuff happening in the chat. They can't figure out what the setting is. And they were using a Mac, and I'm not a Mac person, but in that moment I thought, I bet the answer to this problem is something I can Google. So I went and Googled that, and I sort of explained what it was, and I think I might have even mentioned where I got the information from, and they were able to correct that. And again, if you're working with a service like, Garen Belaney's Micro Studio, they do actually offer some digital production services. So you could have somebody in your corner helping with those things, but especially if you're a solo presenter and you're the producer and you're the on-air talent and you're the person managing the chat and doing all of the things, it's really good to plan up front and just think about those ahead of time. And really just take an opportunity to test some of these things out. Because there's nothing worse than sort of going live and realizing you can't do the thing that you wanted to do. And to be really honest with you, this does happen to me from time to time. Last week, we were talking about OBS Studio, and I wanted to share not my entire screen, but actually just a particular application. And in this case, it was actually just an install of OBS Studio. And it became really apparent in the setup just before that show that I couldn't do that. Like, it just wasn't showing up properly on screen the way I needed it to. So I had to switch my approach, and it wasn't massively difficult, but I did need to think about how I was managing the windows on the screen, because at that point I was sharing the entire screen and not just the application. So, there are things will happen in live streaming. I don't think you need to stress about those, because people are quite forgiving. They know it's happening in real time. They know that you're probably not a professional broadcaster. It's all good, it's all fine. But again, if you can do anything to make your own life easier, that can be really, really useful. Okay, so this is Coffee and Contents. My name's John Lacey. I'm going to take another sip of coffee because why not? Coffee is my favorite thing on this planet, if I'm being honest. So let's do that really, really quickly. So this is Coffee and Content. My name's John Lacey. Thank you for joining me today. Today we're talking all about having a live streaming checklist. And again, I think one of the things that Walter actually mentioned earlier was that especially if you're a beginner, a checklist can be incredibly useful. So it can be one of those things that, it can be easy to be overwhelmed. And again, you don't want to do that. You don't want to leave too much up to chance. You want to test things ahead of time and you want to have a logical sequence. And again, once you've done it a number of times, you may not need to refer to that checklist quite as religiously as you did when you started. But the idea is that you had a process in place. And I think that's really important, processes in general, because I think human beings are really disproportionately fascinated by the new and the novel. And for me personally, I think if you find something that works well for you and you've mastered it and you understand it, you really need a really compelling reason to make a change. Because everything comes with its own learning curve. So if you've been editing in one video editor for 10 years, and maybe there's a new shiny thing out there, maybe it's great, like it may genuinely be wonderful, it may be something you want to invest some time and energy into learning, but again, just be aware that that will come with its own learning curve and you will need to invest some time and some energy to actually do that. So if something is working for you, I would focus less once you've sort of established a bit of a habit and a routine and an understanding and a workflow. I would really double down on that. And you can think about, creating, it's not to say that you can't change things, but again, you really need to know what's driving you and what is the benefit that you're bringing to people and sort of double down on that. I genuinely believe that. I think that's really important. And I guess in the context of today's discussion about creating this checklist, if you can free up some of your brain space to consider what you're talking about and who you're talking to and, just actually doing the thing rather than stressing about the tech or the tools or some weird issue that's randomly popped up on your screen, that can really help you be present and make sure that you're giving a good experience for your audience. So again, why use a checklist? Because we want to free up some brain cells so you can focus on your content and your audience. That's basically what it all boils down to. So, we don't want to overload your brain before you've even started talking. Again, your checklist should be unique to you because it's your checklist and your process is going to relate to your particular needs. What kind of show you're doing, what tools and technology you're using, how you like to show up and how you like to work. I know some people are very relaxed and they'll just hit the button and just talk and see what happens. I'm probably a bit more of a planner. I like to have a good structure to the things that I want to actually cover. And often for me personally, and I get the feeling this isn't typical of most people, but certainly what I know about myself is if I give myself the opportunity to go off and think about things for a while, even, write something down on paper or on the computer to organize my thoughts, that usually, it helps me to feel more confident and I feel like it gives me a better opportunity to hit the points that I really wanted to hit. So in terms of creating your own live streaming checklist, think about the preparation, the planning and the scheduling. What are you going to be covering? Where are you going to be covering? Both in terms of the tools that you're using, but also the destinations. So are you going out on YouTube? Are you going out live on Facebook or LinkedIn or wherever? And again, a lot of that will depend on your audience and where they like to live. But also, having a focus about what it's about will help you, create thumbnails and titles and descriptions. And it'll also give you the ability to sort of promote it ahead of time. So you can tease some of your content ahead of time. You can ask questions. You can solicit feedback. You can run quizzes and surveys. And, that stuff can actually... It's not just a good lead into your content, but it's also, it's something you can talk about on the live stream. You can say, I asked my LinkedIn audience who owns a Stream Deck, and 70% of them said yes. They did, in fact, own one, or whatever the case may be. I'm just making that number up, but I know in the circles that I certainly operate in, we're very fond of that tool and that family of tools, actually. So again, once you've set up the live stream events, and again, depending on the tool you're using, it's a really good idea to set up an event ahead of time. That way, people can say that they're interested. They can get notifications about when you do go live across various platforms. And again, they can probably share that with their friends. They can broadcast that to their wider audience if they want to. And then, in terms of preparing for the live stream itself, make sure you've got if you've got a show run document, again, may not be for everybody, but it's something that I like to do just to make sure that I cover the points that I want to cover and I hit those. And even in terms of, when are you going to have a break? When are you going to talk about a particular product or service? Maybe you've got a pre-recorded video that you want to run in the middle of your live stream. Just making sure that you know when that's happening, because that'll help you break up the live stream. And also, if you are working with other people, they'll know what's happening as well. And the captions, organizing the chats, again, how you do that will vary from tool to tool, but again, just be mindful of it and sort of decide on how you're going to approach those things. Lights, camera, action, obviously the obvious things. If you want to be on camera, make sure you've turned on your camera, make sure it's connected, make sure that you've tested things before you go live, just to make sure everything's working the way you expect it to. And, just once you've got some of those technical aspects out of the way, you've ticked them off your checklist, you're happy to go, then you can sort of really get stuck into your live stream, talk about your content, and really enjoy the experience and make sure that you're present for it. So that's why I think that's worthwhile. Again, if you want more information about today's topic, you can head over to johnlacey.com. I've got a little bit of an article over there. I'll probably write a little bit more about that after the show as well. So thank you for joining me today. Thank you for those watching the recording later on, and especially those that join me live in the chat. I really appreciate that. I hope you have a great week. And again, I hope to talk to you again soon.